Hi, and welcome to the Curious Collective podcast, conversations designed for the veteran and first responder community to bring awareness to those holistic practices that help us live our best life. So tap into the wisdom and knowledge of our guests to heal, transform, and live as your true soulful self. Listeners, I have a special guest for you today, Shane Saunders. We have literally been talking for about 40 minutes already pre-podcast, and I should have recorded that as well because it's been pure gold. But introducing Shane, multifaceted wisdom keeper, and I'll just pass over to you and say thank you for joining us.
Great to be here, Katie. Being a veteran myself, it's always great to see someone that's come out of the fold as such, and then is helping people transition. Not that you need a lot of help to transition into life because you're still in the military, you're living life and stuff like that. I think it's just good to have that. Keep that camaraderie, I guess, that you get in the military, which I think is one of the biggest things that I find from the people that I talk to, and still, I still have lots of friends in the military currently serving and also out. So I think that camaraderie and being able to keep up with structures and things like that. And I think that I know we mentioned this before, but you really have to be very aware and proud of the fact that when you come out of the military that you did have some kind of structured discipline, because I think that's an arrow in your quiver when you come out. It's a really sought after thing in this day and age of chaos.
Chaos, I like
that is the world right now.
Yeah. And I love that you could join us. And I actually found you through the synchronicities of social media. And social media isn't always my favorite thing, but I do love social media when it brings people like you into my fold. So what is it that you are out there doing in the world at the moment? What are some of the main things?
So when I left, I was a physical training instructor. I was a PDI in the military. So I've always loved, health and wellness and the body and those sorts of things. So when I left, I went straight into personal training. Just what am I going to do when I get out? I did take some other positions and other jobs, and which is interesting, and that comes back to what I was just saying about the discipline part. I could go out and work anywhere because of that, showing up, being diligent, being disciplined. But I really focused the energy that I had into business, into my own business. I had the confidence to make it work. I think one thing that I will say to most people coming out of the military, regardless of what your career was like or the challenges that you may have, you have a really great opportunity to go into your own business, just because of being part of a larger structure and things like that. So I think that's one thing that you should really take away from it. So I came out, started my own business, and going into personal training or into the health world, one of the things that I discovered fairly early on in that journey was that if you want to take the business to a next level, I would have to specialize in something. And so I thought about this, and I thought, okay, what is it that we're going to specialize in? And so for me, while I was in the forces, I was in the Navy, I had the great pleasure of really being great at what I did in the forces as in the PT side of things. So I was often attached to the dive teams. Dive teams are often a feeder into the regiment or into commandos or into TAG. They often feed off into those, and vice versa. Guys come out of TAG and come out of the SAS and come into the dive team. So there's a little like sort of rotating doors that go on in those. So, being attached to those high performers, that drove me to learn more about high performance, more about what makes the body tick. But really, where I got to was what makes the mind tick. Like like where is that in amongst this whole thing? And being exposed to, I went through the Carter course myself, because I thought, well, where else is there for me to go in the forces? I want to go all the way through to the SAS. Getting in there and doing the training, what I discovered in my time was that having experience in the field and being in the army would have been way more helpful for me, because it was it was difficult to get through those, not get through the Carter course, not having that experience. And, of course, going through, I decided, hey, maybe being a professional soldier is not for me. So, I decided, I got to that moment where I finished the selection course and went, I could go through. They invited me back again. They said, hey, go and spend some time with commandos and then come back. And I was like, no, I think I'll get out and I'll pursue, my own career path. So fast forward into business, having that experience then helped me to go, okay, well, if I specialize into something, I want to specialize into mindset. I thought to myself, well, what is the link between physical body and mind? And I discovered the breathing or breath was this link. So it became a bit of an obsession, and that obsession led me to, go and seek out, well, who are the best in the world? Who are the gurus in this space? And so I spent, was my wife and I, we were both on the journey, but we spent probably 3 years traveling all around the world. We went to seminars, we went and met breathing gurus. We were, we were fortunate enough to connect up with Wim Hof at the time. He was doing breathing and ice bath. I'd had a lot of, it was very familiar for me, cold water, because working with the divers a lot. I was down at recruit school, down at basic training at a Cerberus there, and I would take the divers, the new guys that would come in, and we would go and spend hours in the water down in Melbourne in winter, like really
yuck.
Cold water. Yeah, it was yuck, but invigorating, right? Like really, and tough, it was really tough, really good for mental toughness. So, naturally I gravitated towards that. In running that business and in doing things, I also had a really keen interest in investing. So, I've alongside running the business, I've been investing in property. I've invested in tech companies. We've currently got one that's going to IPO next year, that's really exciting. Being a ground floor investor in, it's in the health and wellness space, of course. It's health tech, which it was good because I know a lot about. So, that entrepreneurial spirit of doing many different things has really come alive for me since leaving. And I always look back on the foundation that I got in the military as a positive. We kind of discussed that a little bit off, off air, and I'm sure some of that stuff will come back up. But that's really, really where it's led me to is this. You mentioned wisdom keeper before, and I take that label really seriously because although we live in a very modern world, our body and our brains are very ancient. They've still got very ancient programs that run, and it just is really fascinating to me that some of these things, for example, like breathing, like, the natural things that you can do to really keep your stress and anxiety and depression under control really does come back to some very, very simple, not easy. And I always say that to my clients and the people that I work, simple, not easy, because the simplicity of what you can do is that it's simple, but I understand that it's very difficult and not easy when you are, deeply depressed or have got really high anxiety or, all of these different things. However, there are very natural things that you can do. Often they do take work. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people, they may fall into that habit of just not wanting to do the work. And so, keeping motivation up, keeping the will inspired, the will to do things is really if I could boil down what we do through breathing, through all the other things, it is teaching people to find the willingness. You can teach anybody anything. Anyone can learn any skill. You can learn all about how, natural sunlight or really good water or exercise even will really, like kick a dent in your depression. But it's the willingness to actually do it is something that unfortunately you cannot teach. Someone has to be able to cultivate that inner fire, that inner desire to be able to get themselves up and get moving into those things.
I love how you've just spoken into that, and I've never actually really voiced that. And with the work I do, energetically, that makes sense because will sits within the solar plexus. So if you don't have that internal fire and be able to sort of balance and tap into that, how then can you get up into the heart to experience joy, love, compassion, forgiveness, empathy, kindness, all the things really that tap us into who we are at that soul level? It makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's and when you actually dive into, some people have an aversion to spirituality, and I look at spirituality in a very practical sense, and that is that, you feed the body, we feed the mind. Unfortunately, these days our mind has been hijacked by the phone and by like the TV and
the noise
and those sorts of things, yeah, exactly. But all of those things need nourishment, and your spirituality is connected into both of those things. It is connected into your body in the sense that you live in the body. So if the body is not feeling well, then is it any surprise to anyone that you will feel, spiritually stunted? You will feel emotional, or you might not feel, what it feels like to feel joy or love or any of these sorts of things. And, in my time of learning about these things, there are very practical explanations that will tell you that, yeah, you are a person, but at the same time, there are all these different parts of you, like you do have an imagination, which is very much part of your mind, but it's also part of spirituality, because the imagination is the thing that allows you to project into the future. Like, one of the biggest differences between us and animals is that we can future plan. We can plan, that's how we've got the society we've got. And so, when you do start to learn to break these things down into parts, what it allows you to do is it allows you to form stepping stones for yourself, where you start to then form these little, your own little process for getting yourself healthy, for getting yourself well, for getting you to start to feel better, to start to have better relationships, to start to have better connection with yourself and with other people, to start to have a better attitude. I mean, this thing, attitude, I know, you've probably heard this before, that attitude is everything. It really is. No matter how bad things are around you, like, you can have an attitude of positivity. And I know that, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but it literally is the stairway to heaven. Like, your attitude determines everything that happens to you, or the way that you respond to things. So, that's why it is a worthwhile thing, understanding what happens to me physically. How can I look after myself physically? What happens to me mentally? How can I look after my mental, the mental aspect of myself? And also, what is spirituality to you, and what does it mean? Is it going to church and having faith? That is one part of it. Is it something else that you want to, is it getting into nature? For some people that is a massively spiritual experience. And I don't think it should ever be looked at as this thing that you should never explore because you had a bad experience, or someone else says, it's woo-woo stuff, or it's this or it's that. I mean, for me, I can really speak to that whole, I used to say that when I got out of the military and we were talking about yoga or talking about anything, I would say, yeah, this is woo. And I'm going to speak to something here that's really woo-woo. And I just don't even do that anymore.
No.
Like, it's just not, it's not something that I do anymore. So, I find that, if someone does come to me and we're working on, say, for example, they've got high anxiety or they've got depression. For me, what's immediately obvious to me is that the body will be causing some percentage of that ailment. Anxiety, mentally, anxiety is shit that you're worrying about that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
That mentally, that's it. So
In a nutshell.
you're imagining stuff that hasn't happened yet, and you're getting worried about that, right? So if you're to break it down like that, it's like, okay, can you accept that? Can you accept that you're probably making some stuff up? Right? It's just a very real thing. A lot of people might get put off by that, or might think, well, that's easy for you. You don't have my experience. I totally understand. I will never, I will always say to my clients, I'm not you, so you're exactly right. I don't live your life. I don't understand.
Yeah.
However, anxiety, mentally, there is an element of that. Anxiety in the body is very interesting. And this is where our work really comes in. Anxiety in the body is often caused by low CO2. Low CO2 is a function of two different things. One, it's environmental stress. So if you're in an environment where you're not getting good sleep, you're not getting out into nature, you're not getting good water, you're not getting out in the sun, you're not having great food, you could go down the list and tick off environmental things. All of those things will have an effect on the body that puts the body's homeostasis out of balance. That balancing mechanism is actually CO2 and oxygen and how they interplay in the body and how they function in the cells, right? So this little scale that happens in the body that's trying to always get back to homeostasis. And what I mean by that is your body's always trying to balance to come back to optimum, to get some form of balance.
Yeah.
And so that basically that's determined by how much CO2 and how much oxygen you have in your body. Because what happens is, to have a balance of those two will allow the oxygen then to get into all the cells, to get into all the mitochondria, to move around, to go into the brain, to travel around the body. So there is this whole component of stress and anxiety and depression that is purely physical. Purely physical. I can't speak to the numbers exactly because there's so many different variables out there. But in my experience, I would say that it's at least 50% of your problem. Meaning that in my experience, when someone who's had really bad anxiety or really bad depression or, trauma in some way or whatever, they can alleviate a lot of the physical symptoms of that by exercising, by meditating, by, or a combination of all of those, or a choice, or getting out in the sunlight more, or, or getting out into the community and starting to be of service, or to, you name the things that kind of will get you out there, that will get the physical body moving. Sweating. Do you know that the simple act of actually going and making yourself sweat is probably one of the greatest things that you can do for physical anxiety and depression. Like it's amazing that the body will respond to that. So, these are things where I've looked at this whole realm of call it psychology, call it mental health, call it all of these things. This whole big confusing realm of all this stuff. You can really get these really simple, not easy, right, aspects to it where you can start to lower the pressure and noise of these things in the body first. Once you do that in the body, it becomes so much easier then to deal with the mental and the emotional and the spiritual aspects of those. They come later because they're deeper work. It's deeper
and
work.
they're part of it too. Like you actually get
Absolutely.
curious about it after connecting into the body and maybe connecting to the breath if people haven't in the past even known how to do like a conscious connected breath of sorts.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that, the reason we got into breathing is because it is really like, just for example, take the word, right? Breath goes to spirit and in spiritus, right? Like, well, is that going to give you any clues about what in the ancient world breath was considered is literally the connection of spirit in the body. So it is that thing that using it, and it's why breath is involved in yoga. It's why if you go to all of the ancient religions in the world and look at all of the ancient religions, you'll find a breathing practice associated with most of the prayer or meditation. Funnily enough, you find a fasting practice, right? Which is something that we haven't mentioned here, but fasting, go no further than the Bible. Look at the Bible. Jesus was in the desert 40 days and 40 nights fasting, right? Try fasting for a long period of time. If anyone out there is listening has been on any of the special forces courses, and they do the part in there where they starve you for you have a spiritual experience. Trust me. Like fasting for an extended period. It also goes into the whole realm of hunger and consumption and all the things that are attached to eating, consuming, and how breaking those patterns will give you a profound sense of like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I constantly trying to consume things? And, what am I looking for? So these physical things that appear have these roots in, as we said before, they link into the mental, emotional, and spiritual realms, and they're very physical. Moving air in and out of your lungs is a very physical thing. When you do that for an extended period of time, as we spoke about when we were talking before, and I've seen this so many different times, moving air in and out of your lungs in a rhythmic pattern will put you in a hypnotic state, and that hypnotic state can often lead into states that are non-ordinary, that can have very profound healing qualities to them. And so that's another reason why we use breathing as a modality, because seeing people that are have got very heavy traumas, or they're very depressed, or they do suffer with high anxiety, eventually these tools are a non-drug intervention. They don't require any drugs. You're altering your own body chemistry, and done in the right way with the right setting and the right guidance and someone there holding the space is a quite often a very precise type of healing that people can get. And I've seen that so many times. I've also seen some people have some negative reactions to it, and that really got me to look into, well, why are some people having really healing reactions to it and having these amazing spiritual experiences, and why are some people saying, no, it makes me feel more panicked, it makes me feel more unsafe, and what that has come back to, it comes back to that what I mentioned before about the CO2 in the body, right? And so understanding that very physical aspect of the breathing has really helped me understand how to then use it in a very precise way to help people to get that healing, transformative experience from the breathing. So that's,
So with the CO2, for the sort of negative experiences or not so favorable experiences, were they having too much CO2 in the body, or just the balance of that? What's your take on it?
No, it's too little.
Too little, right?
It's actually too little. See, this is a great question you asked me, because this is a real common thing that people think CO2 bad. I mean, right now, are you being told CO2 is bad? Think about all the climate stuff they're telling you, right? CO2 is bad, bad, bad. It's actually really interesting, because most people in the world, in the current environment that we're in, most people are CO2 deficient.
Yeah.
And there's a term for it. It's called hypercapnic. And hypercapnia is probably one of the most unexplained, you would call it a condition that people have in the world, and that is that they're doing what's called overbreathing. They're breathing too much, which is lowering their CO2, which is then putting in this heightened stressed state. So it is actually not enough CO2. And so the breathing technique that we really focus in on, which we learned through studying the science of breathing and studying all the other breathing techniques, really comes down to this very simple process. And that is, as you inhale and as you exhale, and there's a small pause that's supposed to be in your breathing after you exhale. Most of us breathe just in and out. So there's no pause, and that pause is the actual balancing part. And what that pause does is that natural pause that the body does balances the CO2, right? It makes sure that your body retains enough CO2 as well as excreting the CO2 as waste in the breath, right? But what it does is there's a little pause that retains the right amount in the body. So what's happening in our breathing with environmental, with internal pressures, crappy thinking will make you breathe faster, will make you lower your CO2, which will make you feel worse, which will give rise to more crappy feelings and thoughts, which will make you breathe worse. And it goes around in this vicious cycle, right? So, this is what's commonly thought. Commonly, you would think people go, well, no, CO2 is bad for me, so I've got to get rid of it. So maybe I've got too much CO2 in my body and that's making me feel bad. It's actually the opposite. So, this is where we've really focused in on a very simple technique. We use a triangle shape in the breathing. Really simple. You just imagine a triangle. Yeah. You breathe in, you breathe out, and then there's this very, very small pause. And what you do is you do a meditation or a focus concentration meditation on just that pause. And it's about allowing that pause to happen at the end of the exhale, and then naturally letting the body take that next breath. So if you can train your body and your mind and your spirit to allow that breath to come in, then allow the next breath to come in naturally without forcing it, controlling it. Think about the metaphor, right? If you're controlling your breath, what else are you controlling in your life? You're probably trying to control everything. And this is a really great metaphor for letting go of a very natural process in the body, which all that process is trying to do is get you to balance. And you're overriding that process of it trying to balance. And in overriding that process and taking control, you're smothering it or you're driving it out of balance. And so, this is, although it's very simple, it's very profound insofar as, if you go back to what I said before about what can you do physically for yourself to lower the anxiety and get yourself out of depression and not react to the trauma, or to the thoughts that you're having. This is really where it culminates in this one little tiny process that happens where your body's trying to reach homeostasis, because what your body will do is it will do everything it can in order to take the next breath. Right. That's what all the chemoreceptors that are in your brainstem, all they're doing is they're monitoring your blood and they're monitoring your breath, and they're trying to match the two. They're trying to keep the pH level in your blood in between that, 7.3 and 7.4, whatever that, I can't remember off the top of my head, the range. But all disease, all inflammation, everything arises out of your blood being either too alkaline or too acidic, right? So that pH balance, what it's trying to do is this little mechanism is trying to keep that pH. And, you know, like, I mean, you would have seen it, Katie. How many times do you see ads for pH balanced water,
Yeah.
eat an alkaline diet, right? Like, all that stuff's great. But at the end of the day, your breathing is the very thing that dictates the pH in your body. So that's why it's such a fascinating thing, and it all culminates on this little pause that happens after you've exhaled. And you know, once that becomes a not only are you aware of it, but once it becomes an unconscious process where you're retraining your unconscious body to go, my body needs to just take that little pause. And we're not talking about holding it for a long time. You know, think about, I know not everyone might get this analogy, but it's so apt in this time. You know, the new plugs where you press the plug and it pops up. You know, if you press it too hard, it doesn't pop up, right? If you know, or a press button drawer or something, you got to just push the right amount of pressure on it and then release it. That mechanism in the breathing is like that. The pause is like just this little pause before you bounce off into the next breath. So it's not like this, like breathe out, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, and then let the next breath come in. It's not something like that. It's just this. But if you notice your breathing and you become aware of your breathing, you will probably notice that there's this snatchiness that comes at the end of the breath, or this panic that might arise at the end of the breath, or you feel like you're trying to force the breath in and out, or there'll be something that you're doing with your breathing that you're totally unaware of, that when you become aware of it, the thing is, when you become aware of it, you'll be like, oh my God, this is what I do in my life. I either clutch onto things and try and hold on to them, or I try and force things, or I'm trying to avoid. You know, like, or there's a fear, there's a gasping that happens somewhere in your breath where you're trying to avoid it, you know. So there's all these little different things that will give you clues about how you're behaving, about how your personality is, about, you know, and it's expressed in this process of trying to keep the pH balanced in your life.
Beautiful way to explain it. I've never really heard it explained that way, and I absolutely love it. There's so much there for the listeners to play with and explore within their own body and breath. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, that's why it fascinates me, and you know, when we were talking before, this is why I'm so interested in this, because, you know, if you place it on a hierarchy, how long can you go without food? Arguably, you know, you might be able to go a month, right, without food, depending on who you are, where you are, and things like that. Then how long can you go without water, right? Gets less. You're looking at maybe a week, you know, before dehydration. How long can you go without breathing? Right? It shortens down considerably. I'll let you know, the world record is 22 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we had the guy that, it's probably his record's probably broken by now by someone else, but let me just tell you that it is possible for the brain to survive and everything to survive 22 minutes without air. The average
I'm not
person,
going to try
that. Do not try that. Do not try that. It's a someone who's trained for years and years and years. But the average person, generally, it's about 4 minutes, right? So you're getting into these realms of being in, you know, in maybe weeks with food, maybe days with water, but it's minutes with breathing. So because it's so high on the hierarchy of survival, that to me says, well, it's got high value in, you know, in all these other areas, it's going to have a high value in what you do. So that's why I became interested in it, because I'm like, okay, if this is a high value thing and it has this massive connection into, you know, your spiritual life, it has a massive connection into your mental and emotional life, then, and it's trying to seek balance. Well,
let's support it to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't you want to be seeking balance and helping it seek balance as well?
And make it a priority to develop a greater awareness around your breath and all the components that incorporates, really.
Yeah, I think with, getting, as you would know, Katie, working with people, getting people to be compliant to what they need to be compliant to actually do the work to get the result is probably the toughest part, right? Like, you can say to someone, hey, you can solve your depression by going running laps of the oval, right? And I've really broken it down really simple with some of my clients and had them have some most profound results. Go and run one lap of your local oval. Go and run 2 laps. Make sure you sweat, right? Do that twice a week. Start it twice a week, right? It might take you, depending if you walk, it might take you a few minutes, less than a few minutes, right? Like, to actually do that. It's getting the consistent compliance to it, right?
Yeah.
With breathing, though, you don't stop. You're always breathing, right? Like it's something that you are going to do consistently. You're going to do it while you're asleep. You're going to do it while you're awake. So getting compliance to actually sit and just, recognize your breathing. And this is the first thing. Like, the most interesting thing about our work is we give the most, like, I've spent 7 years funneling all this information down into what I just told you before. That pause after the exhale. When we talk to people, we say to them, I'm going to teach you the most ultimate thing that you can learn in breathing. This is, you hear all these things around the traps. I've met a lot of breathing gurus, and you hear these stories like, I can't teach you this method because it's, if I teach it to you, I'd have to kill you because it's a guarded secret. Like, I can tell you, this is the ultimate secret to breathing. And it is just that little pause after the exhale, which balances the blood pH.
Love it.
Because once you understand that, you can do whatever breathing technique you want to go and chase. You can go and do the really strong circular breathing that gets you really high, and, and all, or you can go and do pranayama, swapping the nostrils. All of those all have this basis in the right balance of this CO2 happening while you're doing the process, right? To have longevity in the practice, all of that. Meditation, the basis of meditation is getting the breath right. The ultimate state for you to be in to get into meditation is having balanced respiration, meaning the body chemistry is in such a balanced state that the brain calms down, everything, the body relaxes, and you can actually achieve that, hypnagogic state, the asleep and awake at the same time, which is such a high value state, because the brain actually goes into a different processing mode when you do that. Some people seek that through psychedelics. Some people seek it through, high risk sports, or, everyone's trying to achieve that, get out of the default mode network of the brain, which is often why people are depressed, or why people suffer anxiety, is because they're in this default mode, where that whole mode that their mind is in is driving them insane.
And CO2 loves the default mode network. Like, it's its favorite place.
Right. Well, it's really what it does is it keeps the body in that perpetual state of low CO2, because it's in that, as we described before, you're in that vicious cycle. So, these things are, like trying to achieve a state that's not your default mode network. There is such a high value in that state. And, this is what self-development, meditation, all of those works are all about, trying to achieve an altered state of consciousness, because, again, it's a natural evolutionary process. It's never been selected out. The really one of the funniest things that I learned in doing all of this stuff is that animals in the wild consume psychedelic mushrooms. Some animals hit themselves, an otter will hit themselves in the head with a rock. And they've studied this. They've gone, why do they do these? Why do they have these behaviors? And it is all to achieve an altered state of consciousness.
Oh, wow.
So it's in nature that we are supposed to be trying to just get out of that default mode for short periods of time, because of the high value that comes from it. Right. Like, so this is, if you look at the essence of the work of what we're discussing, you know, change work or the breathing or some kind of spiritual practice, this is why you do it. You do it because that state, which is unexplainable to people, like most of the time, someone will come out of that state. Like I'll give you an example. When we go and do the breathing processes, there'll always be this group of people that go, I went to this place, or this happened to me, and it's beyond words for them, right? They'll go, I could try and explain it, but I can't quite explain it. Now that can happen to people. You know, that can happen spontaneously for people somewhere. Some people get it through doing talk therapy. You know, some people will get it doing, like I said before, like maybe you know, an extreme sport or something like that. But it is often a indescribable, you know, moment that they have, often coupled with awe.
Epiphanies.
You know what I mean by awe? Yeah, like awe, exactly. Like awe, you know, that awe, you know, you often hear awe inspiring. That awe state, as simple as it might sound to people, is often the antidote that gets people beyond their depression, beyond their anxiety, beyond their traumas. Right. And that and so having a way to actually induce these processes, you know, we can see it now. Like I know I mentioned psychedelics. I'm not, you know, I'm not either for or against or anything, but you can see that now is coming into the fold as a medicine. Yeah. Because that's what it does. It inspires these awe type of experiences for people, and that whatever your stance is on it or not, you're not going to see government start funding it if it doesn't work. Right. You especially not going to get that if it doesn't work. So, you know, these are all often, you know, this is why we're having this conversation, because you understand, you've seen the breathing sessions, you understand it works, you use it yourself, you use it as a tool. So you understand that it actually works. It actually helps people.
Yeah. And I love being able to teach these things to others, to bring it into their daily, weekly practice, to sort of tap into and feel what that feels like for them as well.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, I mean, it's rewarding, right? Like it's rewarding to be able to guide someone through a difficult time, have the compassion to hold the space, and, you know, understanding that you also have the tools to have your own cup full, so that you understand that, you know, having compassion for someone does not necessarily mean that you will let them off easily when it comes to doing the work, right? Like there's that real fine balance between being that solid stand for people when they want to quit or they want to give up, and you know, that they don't want to complete their journey, which we're all on.
Perhaps.
Yeah. And that's a skill in and of itself. And that's why having these practices and practicing them yourself, you understand what someone is going to what they're going to go through. You know, you understand where someone's going to get stuck. And it is rewarding. And it is something that when you learn it for yourself, you're able to somewhat heal yourself, and then you can go and help somebody else. Huge rewards when that happens. I mean, the amount of people that have come to our, whether it's a workshop we've taught or whether it's an online course that we have, the amount of people that have come in and gone, I was doing this for myself, but then I was able to pass it on to someone else and it helped someone else. That feeling of helping someone else, I would even go to say, would be a massive antidote to anybody's depression feelings, or, you know, just being able to pass that on and help someone. Like really, like if people ask me, if they say, what does, you know, cure people's anxiety, or what does cure people's depression, or what does get people out of trauma? There's two things that I always say. One, helping someone else. And there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of things behind that. it can't be because you want to just avoid your own stuff.
Yes.
You can't help people
I'm so
because you
glad
want to
you
avoid
said
your own
that.
stuff, right? Like that's not it. You obviously you got to do the work yourself, but the real reward comes when you've done the work yourself and then helping someone else. It's like I don't know, there's something that puts you in that creator status that gets you closer to whatever you're looking for spiritually, because you've been able to actually enact it in the real world. Yes, you've done it for yourself, but you've been able to do it for someone else. The second thing I always say is that I don't think that stuff ever disappears completely. I think that you will always deal with anxiety and depression and traumas in your life. It's just that you now understand how you respond to those things, and responding to it with a bigger field of compassion around you, strength and confidence. It doesn't mean that hard stuff's never going to happen to you in your life. It doesn't mean that you're never going to be susceptible to traumas again. You most certainly are living in a body that's just
having
how
a
it is.
human experience.
Exactly. I think more acceptance that is going to happen. However, you do have the tools. Not only do you have the tools to deal with it post if something happens, but you can be proactive about it. You can have your meditation practices and your breathwork practices and your naturing, whatever you do, forest bathing, getting out in nature or going to the beach and swimming or whatever it is, it can be anything. But as long as you're proactive with them, you're going to build up a callus. You're going to be protected when those times fall upon you again, or you're trying to support someone else. So, I don't know if you asked me a question, but
that was such valuable wisdom. With listeners, you need to rewind that last part and listen to it again, because Shane has just spoken my language and said it in such a beautiful way. Now, I have one more question to wrap up with, and I hope that it comes with some advice to those listeners within the community that this podcast is for. So I draw back to when you mentioned, and I'm the same, like when we were in the service and we referred to this type of work that we know, love, and immerse ourselves in now as woo-woo. Like, what was the pivotal point for you to transition from that into the work you're doing now and to so openly speak about it? And how can others follow that path for themselves?
That's a really good question. There's many ways that I think that I've grown and developed in that. I think one thing would just be youth. I joined the military when I was 16. So I spent the latter part of my teenage years kind of growing up in there. So I would say that youth was a factor that maybe held me back, not being exposed to personal development or spirituality in any way like that. I think that times have changed a lot. I think that people are starting to understand that science and the scientific way of thinking, which I would very much put down to a hierarchical structured type of thinking. I would very much put down to the pragmatic methods that you learn in the military. It seems to be a very rote, science-based approach to things. Not that I'm saying everything that you learn in the military is scientific, but the structure, if you get my meaning. What I've learned that's really changed the way that I look at things is that method of scientific and reductionist and always needing to have an answer and always needing to have a method for things has a lot of pros, but it also has this very specific con, and that is that it almost trains you to think that you know everything and that you've got to know everything. What the spirituality side has taught me is that there's this little tiny gap between where science comes in and then spirituality comes in, and there's a gap that science will never be able to explain everything, and that gap is what I would call faith. So you have to have some kind of faith that, number one, you don't know everything, and you have to admit to yourself that there is something that has created life that we can't explain. So like, how are we alive? Like, you know, like, what is life? What is life force energy? What is it? So if you can accept that there's something bigger than you or beyond you that you do need to be answerable to and have respect for, which forms the basis, I guess, of religion or spirituality. It's that, you know, you understand that you're part of something bigger. I think that is kind of, that was the really big turning point for me, was understanding that. And then I guess, you know, reading books was a big thing, you know, starting to pick up books on, you know,
Getting
whether it was
curious.
psychology or I think that, well, that's a great word to put in there, is just being curious about that. So I think it's a personal thing. I think that a lot of people still in the military, if I remember back, and this is probably true, relevant for people right now and people that have just got out, I still think it's there. I think it's just having the courage to actually say, hey, I'm going to explore this. And look, it has, I mean, I can't say that it's got any net negative other than someone wanted to try and take the piss out of you, which as you begin to know more about yourself, really you start to understand that what you think people think about you and why you might draw criticism from people is completely opposite to what you think it is, you know, like, you know, when you start to learn about people projecting their own fears and their own inadequacies onto you, and you can start to have compassion for people. You know, if someone's really giving you a hard time, you might have more compassion for that person because really there's something in them that's in you that they're either really angry about or they're jealous of, or there's something going on for them. And I think that those kind of realizations of understanding, you know, that humans are human, quite often if someone's got it in for you, they're really got it in for themselves and they're projecting it onto you.
That is gold.
Like, it's you know, I think it's those things that you begin to wake up to and learn, which allows you to have compassion for people like that. And really, ultimately, you want to live a free life. I know this sounds cliche, but having compassion for people, especially people that are trying to attack you, trying to do something to you. I don't mean attack in the way that you're in physical danger or physical harm. That's a completely different thing. But just words, you know, just people saying things or they've got it in for you in some way. Having compassion for them through that knowledge of understanding how projection works and how that kind of stuff works. Huge amount of freedom.
It's a game changer. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It creates so much spaciousness and freedom within your life. And I love that you brought it up. And, you know, it's quite a valuable conversation there. And it might give people points of reflection within relationships that you've currently got. Like, if people are doing that, like, maybe just sit with it a bit. But when you spoke before into, you know, not knowing anything, this is what I'd love to just end on. This one is, someone once recently said to me, intuition, right? So is inner tuition. So it's about learning about yourself on intimate levels, on different ways that you never have before. I know people, especially within this community, veteran first responder, they're seeking all the answers externally. You know, I'm doing this course and that course and reading this person, following that guru, doing this thing. It's like, but you already know it. Like, it's already within you. You've got all the answers, really. That's just aiding what you should be seeing within you. So yeah, what you've just said talks into that, because it's about your inner tuition, your inner knowing, your inner voice.
Yeah, that reminds me of the paradoxes that you do come across in the spiritual work, or just in general if you're reading philosophy or you got the willingness to learn it. And the paradoxes always talk about, you know, the fact that you already know everything, you just might have forgotten it. Life is happening for you, not to you. You know, all these things that you have to learn to trust. You know, there's this saying, and it always makes me laugh. and it's in lots of different cultures. But the one that I heard was like in the more in the Arab culture, but they say trust in God and tie your camel to the fence, right? And it's that, the paradox is trust in the flow of life, but always remember to dot your I's and cross your T's, like still be conscious and aware of what you're doing, but have that trust that things are unfolding, that life is happening for you. And, as unpalatable as it is, all the stuff that's not going right for you in your life is there for a reason. Like, and it might just be a shift in attitude or a shift away from certain things that you're doing, that things open up and you start to discover, oh my God, that was kind of me. That was really in the way. And, as you know, with doing this work, Katie, it's often taking personal responsibility for yourself that is the hardest.
Oh my goodness. What a conversation. Thank you so much, Shane. I feel like I could talk to you all day long, but we better keep this podcast to a limit. And I so very appreciate your time and space to come on and share your knowledge and wisdom with this amazing community.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much. Katie out.